And good evening. Welcome to the Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show. I'm your host, Matt Stewart, joined as always by our former Florida State National Championship offensive lineman, Forrest Conley. And Forrest, we got some big games to preview for the next hour. We've got Georgia at Tennessee, Mississippi State at Auburn, Ole Miss at Alabama, Texas A&M being host to South Carolina, and Florida entertaining Vanderbilt. And before we do all that, it's time for our opening kickoff as we hit the big news around the Southeastern Conference over the last 24 hours and even over the past week. And it starts with Dabo Swinney. Wait a second. He's not in the SEC. He's in the ACC. But on Kurt Herbstreit's podcast today, again asked about the constant speculation. What happens when Nick Saban one day retires at Alabama? Are you interested in that job? And so Swinney says today to Kirk Herbstreit that you never say never. What do you make of his response, and does that fan the flames of speculation involving Swinney to one day going to Alabama?
Well, it's very interesting that Dabo would make that statement, and I think it all goes back to where he's from. You got to look at the money. Clemson cut the check. When you look at the life of his contract, he's about $6.7 million. That puts him in third right now as far as salaries behind Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh. So it's not about money. I think it's about the fact that, here's Dabo Swinney. He's from Birmingham. He's from about 60 miles outside of Tuscaloosa. He went to the University of Alabama, played for the University of Alabama. That's where he started his coaching career at the University of Alabama. Being an Alabama kid, he's probably been an Alabama Clemson Tide fan all his life. Outside of when Clemson plays Alabama, he probably wants them to win the ball games that they play. It reminds me of Urban Meyer. When Urban Meyer quit, left Florida, retired, he said he was dealing with some health issues.
Right.
It was about his family. There was one job that Urban Meyer would take. That job was Ohio State. Urban Meyer from Toledo, from Ohio. He's an Ohio kid. So I understand why, Dabo made that statement. I just don't think it's the right time to make that statement.
He's just answering a question. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And the other big question, nobody can answer that, maybe only Saban, and maybe Nick Saban can't even answer that right now, is how long will he continue to coach? Another 3 years, another 5 years, another 10 years. Right now, there's no doubt that Nick Saban in Alabama, or maybe it's Dabo Swinney and Clemson, the most dominant team in all of college football, but we'll hit on that subject a little bit later as well. Rocky week on top of Rocky Top as the Tennessee Vols prepare to take on the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday. This following a lackluster win against UMass last Saturday. Coach Butch Jones ranted a little bit this week about the negative media coverage he gets there in Vol Nation in Knoxville, in the state of Tennessee. The legendary Peyton Manning says he's all in and all behind Coach Jones. Does Butch Jones' rant against the media coverage help or hurt his cause?
It hurts your cause. Come on, Butch. Give me a break. You're one of the highest paid coaches in college football. Expectations are there for you to win football games. Last year, you got a pass. This year, the Florida game, it should not have been a ball game. You came to the game healthy with all of your players. Now, we know the quarterback issue with Darmody, and there's been some questions about playing the young kid. But at the end of the day, you're playing against a Florida team that's reeling, a team that lost 9 players. 2 key players on the offense as far as your starting tailback and starting receiver. You're playing against a true freshman quarterback, a transfer, and a guy, Del Rio, that we don't know if he's going to be there, if he's not going to be there. They've got rotating chairs at quarterback, and you're going to lose that ball game. In the way you lost the ball game, it wasn't a miracle throw with a guy that just got behind everybody. It was a player that did not play the position well, did not play defense. At the end of the game, you're supposed to be playing protection, you're supposed to be playing prevent defense. You didn't do it. Don't win this game and see what happens. You win this game, the media will love you, but that's a part of it. Stop crying and start winning.
As always on the Dixie Vodka SEC Preview Show, we go to your comments here in your post on Facebook. Vicky Berry had the very first best comment of the night when she said that Saban will coach Alabama from the grave. And there's some truth to that because Bear Bryant really did. His shadow hung over that Alabama program until Saban took over and got rid of the shadow.
Well, you think about it. Nick Saban, as great as he's been, as successful as he's been, people are still having a debate as to whether or not Nick Saban is the greatest coach, not in college football ever, but at Alabama versus Bear Bryant. I have to say, because I've only been able to watch Saban during my time and the way the game has evolved, that Nick Saban is the best ever coach at Alabama. I think he's the best ever coach in college football because there's no sight to the end of what he's doing right now. Here's a team that hovers around number one if they're not there, and everybody is intimidated and scared to play, and their recruiting continues to get better. And Nick Saban doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. So I think that Nick Saban is the guy. And when you look at Bear Bryant and the shadow that he cast, I think Nick Saban has stepped beyond that shadow.
All right, Vicky, thanks for that post. Item number 3 in our opening kickoff, the scandal at Florida only gets deeper. It was revealed this week that the 9 players that have been suspended are facing felony charges in regard to the allegations of the credit card fraud. Those 9, of course, include star running back Jordan Scarlett, star wide receiver Antonio Callaway, defensive lineman George Smith. He might be the guy in the deepest of it all. 4 more felony complaints added to his name this week. Do you expect any of these players to make it back, especially if these charges prove to be true?
Unfortunately, I don't. When you see how it's went on and moved on and moved on, and now we see that all of these young men are being charged with felonies, it's very sad what's going on with these kids. I hope that they can find some way to reconcile, get their careers back in order. Deal with this first. Deal with it first. But if not at Florida, somewhere else, continue their careers and understand you have to take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. But I think the bigger problem is looking at why we continue to see things like this happen at the college level with some of the kids. You've got to look at some of the backgrounds of some of these kids and some of these schools that they're going to and playing at. You can take a kid out of their situation and out of their environment, but you've got to also cultivate within these kids to understand how to live within the environments that they're in on these various college campuses. So often these kids get into trouble and there's no way to bail them out, and they just get swept under the rug, and the schools move on to the next young man that can help them win games. What I would like to see is some of these schools step up to the plate and address these problems, get to the source and the meat of the problem. We know what it is and what they did, but let's look at why they did this, and let's look at what we can do to fix it. And it all goes back to what we've always talked about. College players need to get paid. A lot of this stuff is trying to get nice things, get nice clothes, have money in their pockets to send home to their families who sometimes don't have lights, don't have food, don't have the bare necessities that we take for granted. So I think as opposed to just sweeping these kids under the rug, whether they stay at Florida or not, let's look at the bigger issue. Why these young men are doing this, and what can we do to train these young men to make better choices and better decisions so we don't continue to see this type of behavior.
Long post that Florida has moved on, and I think he might be right about that. And I love you, man, but I got to take some exception to you. There's a lot of kids out there that don't have and don't do this. So I can't excuse these guys' bad behavior, stealing credit cards and using credit cards feloniously that aren't theirs and ringing up fraudulent charges. I can't excuse that on their poor backgrounds, and I'm sure they come from poor backgrounds because there's plenty of guys who do come from poor backgrounds who do not choose to go down that route. So I can't excuse them.
And I'm not excusing them.
Okay.
But my thing is, let's affect change. Let's make change. We talk about what's going on in the country right now with sports, and sports has the ability to affect and make change. And with these young men, they should be prosecuted. Of course, deal with the issues that they have and face a judge and a jury to find out what the conclusion will be. But let's also work to fix the problem. This is an ongoing problem. This is not the first time that we've seen stuff like this. Let's go back to Cam Newton, one of the best players that we've ever seen in college football. He started his career at the University of Florida, got into an issue with a stolen computer. He was able to rehabilitate himself, get back in order, become the #1 overall pick, win the Heisman Trophy, win the national championship at another team because he got another chance and someone saw something in this young man and they worked with him. Like I said, I'm not excusing what they did at all. I just want to see something done as opposed to just kicking them out and moving on.
Adrian Moore posts paying them will just make it worse. And we're going to move off of this subject because I think we could probably go a whole 60 minutes, another 5 or 6 days on this subject. So we'll move on from that. Our last item I'll get to on our opening kickoff is kind of a funny item before we start previewing games here. Aaron Murray was apparently scheduled to be out there before the Dogs played Mississippi State on Saturday. Going to do that thing where they call the Dogs before the game and the whole crowd gets involved. He and Verron Haynes former Georgia player there too. But that was before he picked Georgia to lose to Mississippi State, and he was doing a podcast with his former teammates, Drew Butler. So apparently the story goes, Aaron Murray gets a call, and they say it's probably best that you don't do the pregame ceremony this Saturday night because we're afraid you're going to get booed because you picked Mississippi State to win the game. Do you think Aaron would have been booed at the same stadium?
Young fella, let me give you some advice. Never pick against your own ball club. I do think he would have heard some boos from the younger generation, the kids there that may not recognize and know who he is. But I think it would be more cheers than boos because the fan base, the alumni, they know what Murray meant to this ball club, what he did when he was at the University of Georgia, the success that he had, the legacy that he left playing there. But don't pick against your team, especially against a Mississippi State team that your team ran roughshod over. It wasn't a good look. You probably did the right thing if you've got a soft ego by not going because you would have received some boos.
All right, time now for the first quarter. And our SEC really starts here with the marquee game of the week, and that's the number 7 Georgia Bulldogs at Tennessee. This is a 3:30 Eastern Time kickoff on CBS as we start our first quarter here. Remember, the first quarter is brought to you by Dixie Vodka. The South's best tasting is available only in the South and made by Southerners for Southerners. No need for debate on this one. Dixie Vodka is the South's best tasting vodka. Winner of multiple platinum and gold medals by critics and consumers, Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. I'm Matt Stewart, Forrest Conley. Let's start with Georgia and Tennessee here. Bulldogs riding high, coming off the momentum of a 31-3 rout of Mississippi State last Saturday night. Everybody thought it'd be a lot closer than that. Georgia just killed them. Does this victory indicate to you that Georgia has emerged as the team to beat in the SEC East?
I think right now we have to see what they do in this ball game. This is a big ball game. This is an away ball game. This is a team that could easily beat Georgia if Georgia's not prepared to play well. If they win this ball game, they not only themselves in the driver's seat in the SEC East, they've made themselves what I think is the top contender in the South as far as the teams down there, because there's some teams, and we'll talk about that later, that I can give Alabama some problems. But I think they make themselves as the first team that gets the shot to take out Alabama.
Joey Pedge says the Dogs will roll Tennessee with ease. Don't know about that, but I do know this. This is a huge game for Tennessee. Any chance they have of winning the SEC East, they've got to win this game or else they're down the tiebreak. They've got 2 losses, and they're down the tiebreaker to Florida and Tennessee, the 2 teams they're likely battling the division title for. Without an SEC East title, I don't know that Butch Jones keeps his job. So is Tennessee playing not only for the SEC East title, is Butch Jones probably playing for his job? I don't think he gets fired if they lose this game right away, but at the end of the season, he might be.
I think he is. I think this is a lifeline for Butch Jones. You've got to win this game, especially how hot Georgia is right now, how well they're playing. This is a must-win. They're playing in Tennessee. All the factors are there for him to win this ball game. When you look at this Tennessee ball club, I think right now they're a shell of themselves. We saw they did not play as well as we thought they would after the Florida loss against UMass. You look at a ball club that I think the spirit of Tennessee is laying down at Florida Field and Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Now, they walked out physically, but spiritually, I think that team is still there trying to figure out what happened and how it happened. For this club, they've got to win for those kids to get back into it and realize they're still in it, and they've got to win for Coach Jones and his staff to feel comfortable about keeping their job.
Vols breaking out the smoky grays for this uniform. They were for this ball game wearing the smoky gray uniforms. They were 2-0 wearing the smoky grays last year. You're a former player, played at Florida State, played your entire life. Does that kind of stuff, does it help?
No. It doesn't. Very easy, very straightforward. No, it doesn't. What helps is what's in your chest, in your heart. That's what helps, and that's what has to happen. They've got to go out there. They've got to play with heart. They've got to play with conviction. They've got to hit it out the dogs because Georgia's coming, and they feel real good about themselves. Tennessee plans on winning this ball game. They've got to hit it out of them. The crowd has got to be into it. It's got to be a concerted effort by that entire program to win this ball game.
Jake Fromm, 9 of 12, 201 yards, a couple of touchdowns in the rout of Mississippi State last Saturday. You know, they were really good numbers, but Georgia really has not had to rely on Jake Fromm to win a game for them yet. What do you expect from Fromm in this one, and will this be a game where they have to rely on Fromm a little bit more?
A couple of things are going to happen in this ball game. First of all, the crowd noise will play a factor in this ball game. You'll see the offensive linemen holding hands, and they'll do a snap count. What Tennessee may do is pack the box, and if they pack the box, that's going to force Fromm to throw the football. I think a key player in this game will be Nada, the tight end. He's a big kid. He can catch the ball. He can run after the catch. I think that will be big. If he's able to get some seam routes and get the football in his hands and get positive yards, now you make that safety sit back, which pulls him out of the box, which gives Chubb and Michelle room to run the football. But the big key will be the offensive line, how they respond in a hostile environment, how they deal with the crowd noise. When I played as an offensive tackle, you're on an island. And what you have to do is you have to look straight ahead. Keep one eye on the inside, one eye on the outside at your man. When you see any type of movement over here, you kick straight back. You don't open those shoulders. You kick straight back 3 steps. At 3 steps, you can open the shoulders and run the defensive lineman past your quarterback. You have to remember, Fromm is a true freshman. He is a young kid, so you don't want to get him rattled early by getting him hit by those Tennessee defenders. So the offensive tools will be key in this ball game, and I think the tight end will play a big role for Georgia.
Coach Kirby Smart says that they hope to have Jacob Eason ready to go in this game. Of course, Fromm remains the starter, but do you work Eason back into the mix in this ball game, or do you wait for Fromm? If there is a need for Eason to come in, do you expect to see Eason play in this game one way or the other?
I don't expect to see Eason play in this ball game unless he has to. Fromm was very efficient last week, and if Fromm plays well in this Tennessee game, we have that quarterback controversy that we talked about early in the season, because now Fromm has won 3 of the biggest games for this ball club this season: at Notre Dame, at Tennessee, at home against Mississippi State. When you look at those wins, how do you pull him out as your starter and return to Eason? And nothing against Eason. I love the kid. I love the fact that he gives it his all when he plays, and he does what he wants, does what he has to do, for the program and for the football team. But at the end of the day, when you look at this kid Fromm and what he's done, if he's able to go to Tennessee at Rocky Top and win this ball game, when you look at his record as a starter, you know, you've got Notre Dame on there. You've got Tennessee on there. You've got Mississippi State on there. You can't not start this kid anymore.
Mike Morris says that John Kelly is going to run wild. LaShawn Hawes says the Dogs will hold Kelly to 50 yards. Kelly, Ball's running back, is the leading rusher in the SEC. He's averaging 112 a game. He might be, and certainly he has been, the best running back the Bulldogs have faced so far this season. Can Tennessee and John Kelly run right at this Georgia defense?
Ask the quarterback Fitzgerald from Mississippi State. It sounds easier than done. This Georgia defense, I think, is very underrated. Why did Georgia work so hard to get Kirby Smart over there? Because he's a defensive genius. He knows how to coach defenses. Once again, this is one of those games that I think Kirby Smart gets excited about. Think about the times at Alabama when they played Tennessee, and Tennessee was supposed to have a big-time rushing attack, and what happened. Look at the athletes on the Georgia Ball Club. They have the same type of athletes that Alabama has. I think that Kelly runs into a brick wall in this ball game. I'm not saying he's going to get 50 yards, but if he gets 100 yards, I don't think they will be a factor in whether or not they win this game. I think he may get some garbage yards.
Bulldogs are number 3 in the SEC in scoring defense and 4 in total defense. Our final item on this game here, Joel Moody says it. Payback 330, and there's the little thing of that Hail Mary pass that Tennessee used to beat Georgia last year at Sanford Stadium. And I don't know, you call it revenge, you call it payback, you call it redemption, you say we haven't forgotten. As a former player, when you're playing the team the next year after they beat you like that, or beat you last second like that, or in the final minute, you know, how much does that carry over once the game starts?
It carries over completely. I don't know any other way to say it.
Really?
It is. You've been waiting on this game. The way that Georgia lost that ball game, and I remember that game vividly, it was back and forth. The last 3 minutes of the game were probably the best 3 minutes of the ball game. But the way that they lost that ball game, they've been thinking about this all summer. When you're doing that last rep on the bench and you can't get it off your chest, you think about that Tennessee pass and you push that weight up off your chest. When you're running those gassers and you've got to make time, you've got 5 seconds and you're at midfield and you've got to dive and do whatever you can to get across the line, you think about that Tennessee game and that loss and being prepared to go in there and try and break their hearts the way that they broke your hearts. So, of course, that plays a factor into it. And I think those young men will be fired up against a Tennessee club that I still think is reeling.
And Roderick Henderson says Chubb wants revenge. Of course, he's referring to Chubb. That's the place where he injured his knee back in the 2015 season. And this will be his first game back and his last game back at Neyland Stadium ever. Devastating injury. Chubb, of course, having a great season, having rushed for close to 400 yards in the first 4 games and 6 touchdowns. Okay, that's all the time we got for Georgia and Tennessee. Second quarter starting now, and let's preview the Ole Miss Rebels and the #1 Alabama Crimson Tide. Dixie Vodka is our sponsor. The South's best tasting is available only in the South and made by Southerners for Southerners. Lots of new faces in the SEC, but the new face vodka is Dixie Southern Vodka, the multi-award-winning vodka made right here in the South. Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. All right, I'm Matt Stewart. This is Forrest Conley. We got your post on Facebook here. Over the last 3 seasons, this has been a wild game. Ole Miss back-to-back in 2014, 2015, jumped out to a 24-3 first-half lead last year before Bama came back and beat them 48-43. But this year, you know, this isn't the same Ole Miss team. Bama's a 4-touchdown favorite in this game. What do you expect this? Do you expect this game to be a rout, or is it going to be another crazy game like it's been?
R-O-U-T. I can spell it that way, or I can spell it R-O-U-T-E. However you want to say it. Route. Alabama's playing at a different level right now. They're playing like a ball club that's trying to get back what they feel is rightly theirs. And that's the title as the national champion, the reigning national champion. You watch how they approach every ball game. It's business. It's not fun. They go out to destroy teams. And you saw what they did this past weekend against Vandy. Vandy had no chance. I think Alabama goes in and they give it to Mississippi. I think Ole Miss doesn't have a chance in this ball game because this team is very focused. And when you look at what they're doing, they're looking beyond Ole Miss right now. They're looking beyond LSU. They're looking at other teams out of conference, teams that everyone is comparing, teams that people are saying can give them a challenge. They're beyond the SEC right now with the way that they're playing because there's no consistency right now outside of Georgia. And once again, like I said, until we see what Georgia does this weekend, we won't know if that's consistent. But outside of that team, there's no consistency in this conference. There's no one I think that can really challenge this ball club if they come in with their heads on straight and come in to win like we saw this past weekend.
Janoris Poole posts that Alabama will win 107-30. I don't know if it'll be that bad. Led by quarterback Shea Patterson, the Rebels, the nation's 4th best passing attack. He's averaging 427 per game in the air, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Can he come close to those numbers against this Bama defense? And is that the only way for Ole Miss to have a chance at an upset?
He won't have what I would have to be an Herculean effort to beat this Bama ball club because they're going to pack the box. They're going to stop run. Now, we know defensively they've got some stuff that they need to fix as far as their defensive backs. That's the one thing I see about this Bama ball club that's kind of deficiency, their defensive backfield. But when you've got a defensive line that can rush the passer like they can, they're getting back their linebackers. They're getting healthy again. This is the wrong time to be playing this team. This is a team that everyone thought Vandy would put up a first quarter challenge, and I apologize because I was one of those people. But at the and I had to put that in there. But when you look at what this ball club does well, they rush the passer, they hit the quarterback, they hit the running backs. And if you don't have a great defensive backfield, that's what you have to cover up for that lack of supremacy that we've seen in the past from the Alabama defensive backfield. So I think that Patterson doesn't have that huge game because he won't have time to throw the football.
Brian Keith Rigsby posts that Bama will hold Ole Miss to less than 150 yards of total offense. You mentioned they did get the 3 linebackers back this past week against Vandy. Anthony Deans, Rashaan Evans, Dylan Moses really put the beat down on Vandy after some of the Vandy players have been chirping during the week. Given all the points the Rebels have scored on Alabama the last 3 years, hasn't been a lot of chirping, but do you think that's extra motivation for the defensive side of the ball for Bama to really come in and put a hurting on Ole Miss this weekend?
Well, the SEC West should go and all slap Vanderbilt's football team, because Vanderbilt's football team woke a sleeping dog. And you saw the effects and the response that they got from this Alabama ball club. Alabama, like I said, they're on a manhunt right now. And they're hunting everybody that steps in their way. And Ole Miss is just going to be the next target for them. Like I said, they're looking past those guys, but they will do what they need to do and handle their business and beat them. And I think because everyone expects that it could possibly be another shootout, that they're going to go in and they're going to handle their business just to show people that we are for real. People expected the possibility of Vandy, outside of me, people expected the possibility of Vandy challenging this ball club, and they did not whatsoever.
Yeah, I thought 31-13. I didn't think 59-0 would be the final.
78 total yards. Yeah. I'm still trying to
wrap your head around.
Yeah, wrap my head around that.
That's like a high school game. Yeah. All right, halftime here. You're watching the Dixie Vodka SEC preview show. We're with you every Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern. I'm your host, Matt Stewart. This is Forrest Conley. Dixie Vodka is the South's best tasting. It's available only in the South and made by Southerners for Southerners. Did we tell you that it's made by Southerners, of which you are and we are? Pick up a bottle of Dixie Vodka today for your tailgate on Saturday. Nothing says SEC football like Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. Every week at halftime, we give out the Big Foe Sports SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week Award. And Big Foe, that's your cue to tell us who it is.
Well, Alabama had a young man that blocked extremely well this weekend. He opened holes, had a 90% clip on no sacks, no pressures, just an amazing game. I can't pronounce. I'm trying to pronounce his name. It's kind of slipping me. But this young man had a great ball game. And I'm gonna find it. It's in my notes. I can't find it right now, which is crazy. But let's talk about this Alabama ball club once again. They had over 670. They had 677 yards.
Yeah.
So you're
almost
talking about
500
a ball club,
on the ground.
Almost 500 on the ground. 599 more yards than Vanderbilt. How do you come across and beat a team and have that many more yards? Because of great offensive line play. So once again, when you look at this offensive line, you look at how well they played, and I'll find this young man, and please forgive me, but when you look at how well they, you look at how strong they played, that's why this ball club is winning ball games.
All right.
Because they play well on the offensive line. They protect their quarterback. He doesn't throw the ball 5 yards, but when you can run for almost 500 yards, you're going to beat anybody.
All right, we've got the SEC Network's Cole Kubelik coming up here in a few minutes. He's out in College Station getting ready for the South Carolina-Texas A&M game. But before we do, still halftime here. We got 3 questions. 3 questions for Forrest here at halftime. Question number 1. Let's assume that Alabama is beatable, and I think every team is beatable, no matter how good they are. There is something that can happen. They play bad, the team plays great. Maybe they've overestimated, underestimated, whatever. Give me 3 teams in the nation right now that can beat Alabama.
Clemson can beat Alabama. Penn State can possibly beat Alabama, and Oklahoma. And there are players on these teams that make these teams formidable for Alabama if they face them. Saquon Barkley is the best back in the country right now. When you look at what this kid does on the field, and he's got a quarterback in Trace McSorley. Kelly Bryant, Clemson ball club with Deion Kane and the receivers that they bring to the table, and Baker Mayfield. We saw what he was able to do with that Oklahoma ball club up at the Horseshoe. I still don't like the fact that he planted the flag in the middle of the field, but this young man is a gamer. And he reminds me, he's Johnny Manziel 2.0 with the way he plays the game.
Here's the problem I had with Baker Mayfield planting the flag. If you're going to plant the flag, then don't come back the next day and apologize like it's a mistake. You don't mistakenly plant the flag. You plant the flag on purpose. You plant the flag because you thought about doing it before the game started. So stand by what you did, right or wrong. In that case, I mean, it's not a sin that you planted the flag. It probably was not that classy, probably not good sportsmanship, but just own what you did. All right, question number 2. ESPN's Ryan McGee puts out a bottom 10 every week. In his bottom 10 this week, he put the SEC East as the number 5 item in his bottom 10 for the nation, called him the SEC least. Is the SEC East really that bad?
No, they're not. When you look at Florida, you look at all the players that they lost. You look at Georgia right now. Georgia's playing some of the best football in the country. You look at Vanderbilt. Outside of the loss to Alabama, Vanderbilt was 3-0 coming into a ball game, and they've got some wins. South Carolina is another ball club that is playing outside of what everybody thought they'd be able to play. So I think it's bad to put these guys and label these young men, and I think what it does, it fires them up. It makes them say, okay, we'll show you. I can show you better than I can tell you. So I don't like it, but for coaches, they kind of like it because it gives them locker room banter. It gives them something to tell their team and to use as a motivational tool.
All right, question number 3. We'll get to it quick here because Cole Kubelik's waiting to talk to us. Diehards puts out every week their hot seat rankings. 3 of the 8 spots are hot seat rankings are SEC coaches. Butch Jones at number 3, Kevin Sumlin at number 4, and Barry Odom at number 7. Do you agree with those rankings, or you put somebody else on there?
I put Barry Odom as number 1. I think the team has stopped playing for Barry Odom. I think he's not at Missouri this year. Kevin Sumlin, he got to win out, but he's got to get some impressive wins, and he needs that marquee victory, that signature victory. And, you know, at the end of the day for Jones, we've said it earlier, you got to beat Georgia. You don't beat Georgia, I don't think Jones makes it out this season. And one more thing, I do want to say Ross Pierschbacher for Alabama was the offensive lineman of the week. I wanted to make sure I said that name right.
You got it right.
And I had it written down, but I wanted to make sure I said it right because if you're listening, if you're watching, and Bama fans, if you're watching, I want to respect your players. But back to it, I think that Barry Odom is the number 1 candidate on the hot seat.
I agree with that.
And I think he'll be out after the season, no matter what they do.
All right, start of the 3rd quarter, and we're going to preview the number 24 Mississippi State Bulldogs at number 13 Auburn. We're going to bring in the legendary center and team captain of the Auburn Tigers, now SEC Network analyst, Kubelik. He's going to talk to us about this. He's also going to hit a little bit on that South Carolina Texas A&M game. He's already out in College Station getting ready for that one. Legendary Cole Kubelik, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Bulldogs and Tigers, that's a 6 o'clock Eastern start on ESPN. And boy, how things have changed for these two teams in this past week. You know, Mississippi got steamrolled by Georgia. Auburn goes out, and Missouri steamrolls the Tigers. How big is this game as far as the winner setting themselves on the right course, the loser go the opposite direction as far as the direction these two teams go in the rest of the season?
No, I think it's huge, and I think a big reason for that, Matt, is both teams that need some confidence. Neither one of these teams have played consistent, really good football. We've seen them play great football at times, and maybe they have certain units on their teams that are playing great football consistently, but top to bottom, all 3 phases of the game, they've both had some serious downs at certain points in this season. I want to see how State bounces back. They're a team that sort of built that momentum after the LSU game, through the LSU game, and then really just got punched in the face over in Athens. So I want to see how they react, how they respond. And Auburn, to me, Matt, it's such a strange team, a little bit of an anomaly here. I mean, I was doing my show this week, and I kind of looked at the rankings, and I said, this is the most unsuspecting number 13 team in the nation I think I've seen. Now, I know that score of the Missouri game was a little bit different when you think about what it appeared to be and what we kind of thought of it. If you go back and put it on, it didn't appear to be a dominant performance when you broke down each individual unit of that team. So I think that they're growing. They did some different things in that game that looked better. Jarrett Stidham becoming more and more comfortable. And this could be the first time this season that we see Kerryon Johnson and Cam Petway both on the field healthy at the same time. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of people thought they could challenge Alabama in the West. So this is a huge game for both of the teams when you look ahead down the schedules.
Cole, how you doing? This is Forrest, man.
Doing well, Forrest. I like your I'm going to give you a shout-out there on Chris Baker at Alabama. I thought that was his best game he's had in a Crimson Tide uniform against Vandy. But you obviously know your stuff, so kudos there.
Thank you. Well, Cole, the defense for Auburn hasn't been a question. Given what we saw with the good defense against Georgia had against Nick Fitzgerald in the Mississippi State offense, How confident should the Tigers be that they can do the same thing in this ball game?
Very confident. And I think you've seen some different guys out on the edge, guys like Nick Coe, guys like Jeff Holland, who make this defense a little more athletic on the perimeter, really, than even they were a year ago when Carl Lawson was there. Now, they're not the edge rush presence that Carl Lawson was, but they're guys who can come flat down the line of scrimmage and make some plays and also be disruptive in the backfield when you need them to. And that's where Mississippi State's going to challenge you. They love to run the truck play and the power play. They like to run the little quarterback sweep where they pull two guards or have a lead back coming around, chop those linebackers and defensive ends down and try to build big plays in the alley. I think Auburn has fast enough linebackers and has become athletic enough at defensive end that they should be able to be successful there. I mean, this front seven's playing as well as anybody in the country. And I mean, from a Clemson perspective, Alabama, Georgia, they're doing, I mean, what this Auburn defense is doing along the front, I think, is at close, at best, to what those teams are doing. So they should be confident going into this game, and I think one of the other reasons is you don't have a true game breaker on the perimeter. So you're not going to have to build your secondary or bracket your secondary or do different things at the second, third level, maybe even including bringing in an extra defensive back to try and take a guy like that away. I think you can play pretty much straight up base defense, which means an extra big body, which gives advantage against the Mississippi State run game.
You know, as far as said, defense hasn't been the problem. It's a lackluster offense that has been, and I know, Forrest being a former offensive lineman, you being a former offensive lineman, it probably hurts you guys to watch the way that Auburn offensive line has played at times this year. In the Clemson game where they surrendered 11 sacks. There's been a lot of turnovers as well in that Mercer game that made it a lot closer than it ever should have been. Are the Tigers, though, past all of that now in your mind?
They can be, Matt. And I want to see this group settle on five up front and begin to build some continuity because the talent is there. I thought Braden Smith played great against Missouri, one of the better games I've seen him have. Darius James goes down in that Mercer game, so that's a deal where the depth almost works against you a little bit, having some talent. He replaced two offensive linemen instead of one because Golson moves from center out to right tackle and Casey Dunn comes in at center. Thought Dunn looked good against Missouri. I think Austin Golson will be an upgrade in pass protection at right tackle, but I don't think he is in the run game. Don't think he's bad enough to where it's going to cause him problems, but I think Darius James is a little bit of a better run blocker. So I want to see continuity along the offensive line. And you mentioned that Clemson game. It's frustrating for me, and I'm sure for Forrest, because people are immediately pointing to the offensive line, and they're going to point to Herb Hand. And if you go back and study it, when you're turning guys loose and you're not picking up blitzers and your quarterback doesn't get the fall out in quick protection when he needs to, it's going to look a lot like it's the offensive line's fault, but not every time it is. Now, there were plenty of issues, guys getting beaten one-on-one, losing their matchups, which caused problems in pass protection. But there are a lot of those issues that weren't on the offensive line, and that's why it's the ultimate team sport. It's 11 guys to be successful on both sides of the football, and Auburn just hasn't had seemingly 11 performing together. So I think they can do that, but I'm at a point now with Auburn where I need to see it to believe it.
Well, Coach, Jarrett Stidham comes in with a lot of build-up, a lot of hype, expectations. He gets sacked 11 times against Clemson, has a decent ball game in the last ball game against Missouri. What are the thoughts on Stidham? What do you think he needs to do to improve, and how can he be the leader that they thought he would be coming in?
I don't think leadership has been his issue. I think it's just a comfort level, and it starts with the game plan. And I don't think any offense can be any better than that they're given heading into a football game of what their offense potentially can be. I think that's been a problem for this team. I think the back and forth between Chip Lindsey's system, Gus Malzahn's system, has caused some confusion and hasn't really allowed them to open certain things up. Jarrett Stidham didn't play ball for 2.5 years before he started this season. I think there's still some rest there and understanding what true game speed in the fastest, most athletic conference in football is going to be like. So I think there are a lot of things that have really led to some of the issues with Jarrett Stidham and why he hasn't looked like what we thought would. But the ability is there. The talent's there. You saw a couple more downfield throws against Missouri that really sort of makes you kind of start to shake your head and say, that's the guy that we thought would see on a regular basis.
Let's switch gears real quick and let's hit the game that you're working out in College Station with Tommy Hart and the dude with all the hair, Jordan Rogers, 7:30 Eastern Time on SEC Network. That's South Carolina and Texas A&M. Gamecock start of the season well. big win, neutral site game against NC State. They go on the road, they win at Missouri for what that's worth. Then they come home, they lose to Kentucky, need a last-second field goal to beat La Tech. In the midst of all this, they've lost their sensational star, Deebo Samuel. Where do you sense this Gamecock season is going after 4 games, after they had started the season 2-0?
Well, the potential is still there. And I think this is, like you mentioned with Auburn and Mississippi State, referencing the future of what this team could be throughout the course of the season. This is just as important for South Carolina and maybe Texas A&M as well. It could be just as big a swing game for these two as it is Auburn and Mississippi State. Anytime you have Jake Bentley in a game, I'm confident that you're going to be able to find some offense. He's the ultimate competitor. He's a gamer. He's tough. He understands the offense. He can make throws. He's durable. I just think one thing that has to happen for Carolina is the run game has to open up. They haven't found true balance yet. Now, part of that balance was special teams with Deebo Samuel early in the season. Now he's gone. You don't have the backup plan. You don't have what I call an eraser at wide receiver that's going to erase mistakes of a young quarterback. So he's gone, and Jake has to understand how to distribute the football around and has to find out how to unpopulate the box and find good run surfaces for when they become successful in the run game, because that's going to rest defense. That's going to make them more successful in the red zone. It's going to make them less reliant on a kicker that struggled this season, and that's going to help them win football games. So if the run game doesn't ever come around for South Carolina, I don't see them being better than they were a season ago in the win department. But this is still a team that's dangerous. They have playmakers at tailback. Brian Edwards is a great receiver, and you heard what I think about Jake Bentley. They're just beat up. Not having Samuel is an absolute it's gut-wrenching for a team that stung somebody as much as they did early to automatically now not have him. Not having Zach Bailey is going to be big. He was a first-team All-SEC offensive lineman for.
Well, Cole, you step into a room tomorrow with Kevin Sumlin during this meeting. They had a big-time win in the overtime thriller against Arkansas. Does that do anything to help them recover from the UCLA loss? Absolutely.
I think this team, Texas A&M, builds week by week. And I think they're one of the teams in the SEC that I'm confident has a chance to look very different weeks 8, 9, and 10 than they do right now. Being young at receiver, being young at quarterback, being young at the second and third level on that defense, and not really having some new faces that haven't emerged just yet. This could be a team that's very different and dangerous the back half of the season. I've seen Kellen Mond grow each week, and they're still shuffling the offensive line around. They haven't settled on 5 the last 3 weeks. We do 7 different combinations the last 2 weeks. So if they can find 5 up front, continue to get Mond more confident and more comfortable in Noel Mazzoni's system, it's going to be a dangerous ball club. And I think they're going to find more and more ways to get the ball to Christian Kirk, and he's an absolute game breaker in this league.
Hey, Cole, thanks a lot for being with us. Enjoy College Station. We'll be watching on Saturday night.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate it. Cole Cubelic, SEC Network, joining us from College Station, working that South Carolina at Texas A&M game on Saturday night. All right, time now for the start of the fourth quarter. We have 2 more games to preview here in the fourth quarter. Going to start out with Vandy and Florida, also going to hit the Troy and LSU game. And remember, in the fourth quarter is brought to you by Dixie Vodka. Every season there's something new in the SEC. This season it's Dixie Vodka to make your tailgate perfect. Swing on by and get you some Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. All right, we've already talked about the Florida Gators and their off-field problems. Doesn't look like any of that's changing anytime soon, so no need to go back and rehash that. Big news for the Gators this week for us is that Luke Del Rio will replace Felipe Franks as the starting quarterback in this game. Del Rio came off the bench through the game-winning touchdown at Kentucky last week. Do you think this is the right move at quarterback?
Absolutely. Luke Del Rio showed us that he can read defenses. I can read defenses. Nobody covers a wide receiver like they did in the Kentucky ball game. But Luke Del Rio did win the game, did play well down the stretch. It's almost like when you watch this Florida ball club, whoever throws the game-winning touchdown will be the starter the next week. We saw what Felipe Franks in the Tennessee game, threw the game-winning touchdown, started the game against Kentucky. Now you've got Del Rio come in, throw the game-winning touchdown against Kentucky. He starts this week against Vandy. It's a musical chairs right now with this Florida offense, but Del Rio does deserve to start this game.
Vandy was, of course, crushed by Alabama 59-0 at home last week in what was billed as, one of the biggest games for the Commodores in many years. Derek Mason says afterwards, watch film, burn it, and go on. Do you expect Vandy to be able to do that, or will they have a hard time bouncing back from that loss to Bama?
The reality is Vandy knew they weren't going to win this ball game, but they thought they would be competitive. When you look at the time of possession, 42 minutes and 55 seconds versus 17 minutes and 5 seconds. When you look at the yardage, 677 yards versus 78 yards. They were overwhelmed. They were embarrassed. But most teams that play the University of Alabama are overwhelmed and embarrassed. I think for Vandy, it's because the players talked and chirped prior to the game. You look at this more as, okay, we taught these young fellas a lesson. But I think Vandy will come to play. I think, like Coach Mason said, you get the film, you learn from it, and you know next time you step into a big-time environment what you have to do. And I think those kids will come out with a chip on their shoulder, and they'll play tough against Florida.
You know, while you're winning, no one really takes notice of this, but then after you have a crushing defeat, people start looking around and looking at the numbers. And Vandy star running back Ralph Webb has only 169 yards rushing so far this season. He'll be playing in his hometown of Gainesville this weekend. Do you expect him to finally get unleashed?
Absolutely. When you talk about this Florida defense, they've given up some big rushing yards. I grew up in Gainesville, Florida, played at Florida State. Every chance I got to go to Florida, I wanted to show off, not only for my family and friends, but to that Florida program. And a Webb that probably was overlooked and did not get recruited by Florida wants to prove to them, you made a huge mistake letting me get away. I was here in your backyard. You didn't pick me up. You didn't sign me. You didn't give me an opportunity to play for the University of Florida. He probably grew up a Florida fan, probably has orange and blue all over his home, and now he gets to go and get retribution on what he thinks is being overlooked. So I expect him to have a pretty big ball game.
Vandy quarterback Kyle Shermer, of course, still ranks fourth in the SEC in passing efficiency. Those numbers, you know, as did all their numbers for the Commodores, took a real beating against Alabama. How effective do you expect Shermer to be against Florida?
He'll be better. But when you look at these ball clubs, they come in with emotion, albeit different types. Florida is on an emotional high. Vandy was emotionally abused. So they've recovered from that, and I think they will quickly. We talked about Shermer last week. He has a high football IQ. We know about his dad being a coach in the NFL for several years. He's a big kid at 6'4", 230. He'll get back on track. Alabama tends to make everyone look like this outside of Deshaun Watson and a Johnny Manziel, who are two very special players. So I don't put too much into what Shermer did not do in this ball game. I think he'll recover. I'm not going to say or sit here and say he's going to have a huge ball game, but he'll have much better numbers. He'll be much more effective. I think he'll run the ball effectively, use his size against this Florida defense.
Jody Westmoreland post, where is Tim Tebow? Well, I'm glad that you asked. He's going into the Florida Sports Hall of Fame. How about that?
Absolutely deserved it. You know, I'm so glad he graduated. I did not like him for 4 years because he destroyed my Florida State Seminoles. But he's the guy that you hope your daughter brings home and says, Dad, I'm getting married. You know, a super guy, a great sportsman for the state of Florida, for college football. He's a namesake. You'll never forget this kid. He left it all out on the field, so he deserves every accolade he gets.
The Gators not been able to find, and I'm not saying you're going to find another Tim Tebow, but why have they not been able to find a suitable starting quarterback to last for, you know, more than a year since Tim Tebow left? And Malik Zaire, to me, remains a big mystery because that's all we talked about in it seems like in the offseason. Malik Zaire going to transfer from Notre Dame. Where's he going to go? He's going to land in the SEC, lands at Florida. What kind of impact is he going to have? He's been a non-factor.
To me, Malik Zaire is the same thing that we saw with Golson when he transferred to Florida State. Although these young men played very well at Notre Dame University, when you change into a different offense, you have to learn everything about that offense. And I think that's the big issue here. I think he's the best player to play the position right now. Franks is young. Del Rio's good one day. He's bad one day. I think that Zaire is the best guy maturity-wise, big game-wise, but he just doesn't know the offense. And I don't think Coach McElwain is going to slim down the play. Maybe that's something they should explore, you know, putting a package together for Zaire that he's very comfortable with because he's a very suitable guy. He can throw the football, he can sit, he can run with the football, he can do some things very well. And maybe they put a package together for him. The way they're platooning quarterbacks right now, why not?
They figure out something. They ironically, they are 2-1. on the season. Actually, they're now 2-1 on the season. And, it's like every week we come in here and we kind of sing the death of the Florida Gators. But outside of that Michigan game, they beat Tennessee, they beat Kentucky, and now they get just to be 3-1 if they can beat Vanderbilt. And that game is a 12 noon start Eastern time on SEC Network. Let's turn our attention to Troy at LSU. This is a 7 o'clock Eastern start. It's on ESPNU. This is not an easy game for the Tigers, playing a Troy Trojans team they should beat, but this is also a Troy team that's good enough to win the Sun Belt. Once again, it looks like LSU will be without star running back Darius Geis. Coach O had said early in the week he was out. They changed it to doubtful. Defensive tackle Rashard Lawrence is out. Announced this week LSU has lost safety Ed Paris to a season-ending injury. How dangerous is this game for LSU, especially given their injuries?
I think it's a very dangerous game for LSU. One name I want people to remember, Jordan Chunn. He's the running back for Troy, 6'1", 240 pounds. He's a battering ram. He doesn't mind carrying the ball 25 to 30 times a ball game. He's a back that can make you put more people in the box. And when you do that, you open up opportunities for quarterback Brandon Silver to spin the ball down the field and get it to some of his receivers. So I think for LSU, you've got to take this game serious. You can't look at it and say, we're an SEC West ball club, we're playing against the Sun Belt ball club, we beat them because we should and we're supposed to beat them. Troy is coming to win this ball game. They've got a really good ball club, and they've got some senior latent talent on the team that have played in big games, and Troy's coming in expecting to win.
What do we make of the LSU quarterback situation? Danny Etling obviously is still the starter for the Tigers, but fresh Miles Brennan did play 4 series during last week's game against Syracuse, a game that ended up being a lot closer than most people thought it would be. Coach Ed Orgeron says that Brennan's going to play some in this game too. Says just trying to get Brennan some experience next season. Are you buying all that there isn't more to this story than just getting Brennan experience?
Negatory. I'm not buying that at all. I think this is a test for them to see if it's Etling or if it's Brennan before they get into the meat of the SEC West schedule. I think with this ball club, with this game, it's going to determine who we see more of moving forward. Because when they play against Alabama, when they play against Auburn, when they play against some of the other SEC West ball clubs, they've got to be ready. They've got to know that they can depend on the guy that they put in there. And right now, I don't know if you can depend on Etling. He hadn't shown me a whole lot. Now I need to see to feel good about him going into every ball game. Brennan, he's a young kid. Can he come in and play well? It's kind of like what we see with Georgia, albeit it's the injury that we see Fromm, and now we're talking about whether or not Eason or Fromm will be the starter. I think this game is a litmus test because I think Troy will play them tough, and it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are coming out of this ball game and what Coach Orgeron does, because that's a coach we have not talked about being on the hot seat. And I want to say this, and I'm going to put it out there. He was not the sexiest hire for LSU after the Les Miles debacle. He was not the sexiest hire. And we all know, a lot of people know that they wanted Tom Herman to come in there, but he took the job at Texas. They also tried to get Timbo Fisher, which are offensive-minded coaches. We've talked about the lack of offensive production, the offensive coordinators that they've brought in, and nothing has changed. So this is a game that, if it's a close ball game, this is a game, if they lose this ball game, Orgeron might be on the hot seat.
Yeah, I mean, at LSU, of course, obviously, the hot seat gets pretty hot pretty quick. I think the big question for LSU is, what's the story with the Matt Canada hire, the offensive coordinator? We were supposed to see a different offense at Canada. Is it Etling? In fact, I read a story here where Orgeron said, kind of hinted they were going to streamline the offense a little. So here's Orgeron already, how many games in are we? 4 games in, and now he's already stepping in, at least implying that he needs to step in and take a little control of the offense from the guy that he just hired.
Well, when you look at Odell Beckham Jr., you look at Sterling Shepard, all of these guys that are going to the NFL from LSU, why aren't they having these types of numbers at LSU? That's one of the big questions, and you said it. Why can't they get a quarterback that can throw the football effectively, consistently? You've got a team that have top 5 recruiting classes every year. They've got a pool of talent just in the state of Louisiana. They are surrounded by talent with Texas, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, right around them. Why can't they find a quarterback that can play to the level of the receivers and the offensive line that they have? When you've got running backs like they had with Leonard Fournette last year, this year with Geis, guys that can get you 100, 150 yards, that opens up for your receivers to play big and for the quarterback to have lanes to throw the football. But unfortunately, we have not seen that.
All right, so time now for our 2-minute drill. 2-minute drill this week means we're going to make our predictions for the weekend and also our not just game predictions. We're going to tell you who's going to be the SEC and the offensive and defensive player of the weekend. Before we go, got to tell you that you've been watching SEC Country Preview, and it is brought to you by Dixie Vodka. There are two things that are not debatable. Dixie Vodka and the SEC football are the best in the South. Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. All right, let's start with our predictions, and we'll begin with the Georgia at Tennessee game. I'm going to go Bulldogs in this game, and I think the Bulldogs win this thing by a score of something like 34-24.
I agree with you on that. I think Georgia wins this ball game. I think Nick Chubb has a really good game. Sony Michel returns for this ball game. And Nada, watch the tight end. I think he plays a big role.
All right, let's go Ole Miss at Alabama. I got to go Crimson Tide by a score of 40-14 in this game.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, we're all on board on that one. I don't see much of a game.
No reason to talk about it.
No, really not. Mississippi State at Auburn, and I think this is a huge game. And we had Cole Kubelik talking, the former Auburn Tiger himself, talking about this game. I think this is a big game from the standpoint of, one team, the winner's season can go this way, and the loser's season can go that way. And I think I got to go with the Auburn Tigers here. I'm thinking like a 13-10 kind of game.
I say 13-7. I think Auburn wins this ball game because Auburn's been home. Stidham has seemed to have gotten it together. And I got to go with my guy Cole. That's his alma mater. I got to run with him, so I'm running with the Auburn Tigers.
And I just like the way the Auburn defense is playing. And after we saw what the Georgia defense was able to do with Nick Fitzgerald and neutralize him, I think Auburn's got a chance with their defense to do something very similar. South Carolina at Texas A&M, that's the game that Cole's working. And he kind of thinks that this game is kind of like that Mississippi State Auburn game from the standpoint of winner goes this way, loser season goes that way. And I got to go with the Aggies in this game. And I'm thinking the Aggies, I don't agree with Cole totally in that by the time we get to 8-9 game of the season that we're looking at the Aggies in a different way. But this could be the kind of game that puts them in that trajectory to get to that place where by the time we get to 8-9, we're not even talking about Kevin Sumlin on the hot seat anymore. I like the Aggies in this game 35-10.
That win last week against Arkansas plays big for this Aggie ball club. They have an opportunity to right the ship. You look at that UCLA game, that was horrible for their fan base, horrible for that defense. They just didn't play that well this past weekend. I think they get back on track. I think they win this ball game. South Carolina will put up a fight, but losing Deebo Samuels really hurts that ball club.
Okay, Andy at Florida, that's in the swamp. I'm going to go Gators 17-13 this game. Not a whole lot of offense generated by these two teams in this game. It might not be the most artistic game, but I'm going to go Gators 17-13.
Florida loses this ball game. They lose their first SEC
They're going
game.
to lose Vandy at home?
I think they lose to Vandy at home. This is the signature win for Vandy this season. When you look at what happened this week for the Florida ball club, we know the players have been out. All of these players are facing felony charges. The defensive lineman is facing 4 additional felony charges. That weighs heavy on these kids' mind. And I think with the emotional wins that they've had the last 2 weeks, I think they come down off that emotional high. I think this Vandy club is pissed off. They're embarrassed, and they're going to get their ship. And I think they get a big win down at Florida.
All right, Troy at LSU, the final game we're going to pick here tonight in our Dixie Vodka SEC Country Preview Show. I'm going to go LSU Tigers 28-17 this game in Death Valley.
I say LSU Tigers 35-21. I think Troy played them tough because Troy's a really good ball club that a lot of people don't know about. But at the end of the day, and I said it, guys, at the end of the day.
That's the only time he said it.
That's the only time I said it today, so give me credit.
He only said it once.
But I keep saying it right now. At the end of the day, I think that LSU will overwhelm Troy. Talent-wise, they have a lot more. Death Valley will be rocking. It'll be very loud. But Troy will be game, and we'll play them tough early.
SEC Offensive Player of the Week. I think it's going to end up being Nick Chubb of the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Nick goes for a 50 at least in this game. I think he has a game there. You know, it's not a revenge thing or nothing like that, but this is where he got hurt 2 years ago. I think this game means a lot to him. I think Georgia needs to ride him, and I think they will. 150 for Nick Chubb and probably a couple of touchdowns in this game.
I agree with you once again, man. Nick Chubb will be
Stop
the offensive
copying
player
my
of the week.
notes.
I can't help it, man. It's all set up perfectly for Nick Chubb to be that guy. He's going to get 25 carries in this ball game. He's going to be a workhorse back. He's going to overwhelm and beat up this Tennessee defense. They're going to get tired of tackling this young man. He's going to play with heart and conviction like we always see, but a little bit more because he's at the place where he got hurt. And where a lot of people question whether or not he will ever play again after that gruesome injury. So I think he has a huge game against Tennessee. So I'm going with Nick Chubb as well.
Zach Elrod posts too many split carries to get 150, but I think he does get 100, and he may have a point right there. And Sony Michel's going to get some carries. DeAndre Swift's going to get some carries. I still think Nick has a big game, goes for 150. My final prediction for the week is the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. I'm going with linebacker Trey Williams of the Auburn Tigers. I think he's going to be really big on the for keeping Nick Fitzgerald from running that the option plays, the RPOs, and I think he gets at least 8 tackles in this game, maybe a couple tackle loss. Trey Williams of the Auburn Tigers will be my Defensive Player of the Week.
My Defensive Player of the Week is Lorenzo Carter from the University of Georgia. He'll be a pass rush demon for this Tennessee offensive line. He will wreak havoc every time Tennessee goes to throw the football. He'll be back talking to the quarterback, you know, introducing himself to him. He's a long kid. He plays with great lean. He knows how to use hands very well. I like him on the outside as a pass rusher, and I think he'll be dominant in this ball game.
Yeah, I mean, and Georgia fans certainly are happy to see it. I mean, they were expecting Lorenzo Carter, former 5-star out of the Atlanta area, Norcross, Georgia High School, expecting a lot out of Lorenzo Carter. And it looks like he's producing this 3 quarterback sacks. He might get a couple in this game, too, especially if Tennessee falls behind early and has to throw to try to get back in the ballgame. All right, that's going to do it for our Dixie Vodka SEC Country preview show. As always, send us your questions and comments. We love to read your post on the on Facebook. And thanks to Cole Kubelik as well from taking time out of his night there in College Station to join us on the show as well. We'll be back with you up next Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern. We'll see if we were right or wrong on our picks this week, and we'll be previewing another big batch of SEC football games Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern. Stick around. Coming up top of the hour, we got the Wizard of Odds coming up right here on SEC Country Facebook Live. We'll see you next week.